All right, great. Well, thanks everyone for being here. Looks like we've got about 20 people attending. I see a lot of familiar names. I know we've got, Ben J from Cal North, seeing, Carmen from New Canaan FC. Let's see, a lot of people on here we've talked to before. If you don't mind, everyone, it'd be great to just throw your name and who you're with, what club, maybe what state, in the chat. It'd be great to everyone can kind of just get a sense of who's on the call here today. And the way we tried this last week, for everyone's knowledge, I mean, this is really only our second time doing something like this. So bear with us with any, with flow and things like that. We're trying to just bring people together right now and try to, bring any problems that we're all dealing with or challenges, ideas together. So this is super informal. We've got representation across a lot of different sports on the call. I know there's a good number of soccer organizations, but I know we've got some baseball and other things as well. So yeah, like I said, we did this last week. We tried it over this Zoom. We're using the webinar features here, so pretty straightforward. But everyone is in as an attendee, so you're muted by default just with the number of people. That way, we don't have to chase down the person whose dog is barking in the background or anything like that. But all that said, we really do want, verbal participation as much as possible. So you should see a hand raising feature on the side there. If you're confident you can manage your mute and unmute yourself and you want to raise your hand right now so we can invite you to be able to speak, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, during the conversation, if you have something to say, just raise your hand and I've got control here to just give you permission. So yeah, Jennifer, welcome and allow you to talk. So now you're able to mute and unmute yourself and you can chat freely. So anyone else, please, just raise your hand at any time and I'll open up the ability for you to talk. Otherwise, last time a lot of the comments and everything in chat was over the chat feature. So, really nice to go that route too. And us here, we're going to be reading those. We had a good number of questions and topics submitted ahead of time. So I think lastly, more just a disclosure that, we're not claiming to have all the answers here, be experts, in everything related to youth sports organization, not by a long shot, honestly, but we do talk to a lot of organizations. It's our job to be in this industry and talking with people and understanding what's happening. So, without further ado, let's get into it. I'm going to introduce our team here real quickly. But again, we want you to participate. We want you to, share your perspective, ask and answer questions. This is not about us presenting to you. This is just us bringing the group together. So I've got, first myself, I'm the co-founder and CEO of TeamGenius. If you're not familiar with TeamGenius, I know we've got a good number of customers on the call, but if you're not, we do player evaluation software. So anything from tryouts to tracking player development over time, sharing feedback and nice professional report cards with mom and dad, that sort of thing. So also from, my team here, I've got Gabe Skelly. Gabe is our customer success manager. So if you do choose to move forward with TeamGenius at any point, Gabe's the kind of, your point of contact when you need training and just getting set up with the system and anything account related. And then we've got Ruth Nicholson. So Ruth is, she runs an organization called Go, and she does, governance and operations consulting for youth sports organizations, and also works part-time for TeamGenius, part of Gabe's team and our customer success program, responding to everything from support tickets to training and onboarding customers and kind of just managing, how do we make sure people have successful evaluations with our tool. So without further ado here, let's dive into kind of our first topic here. And again, we had about, let's see, probably 7 or 8 questions submitted ahead of time. So I kind of broke them into a couple of themes that we can discuss, but by all means, we're going to be keeping an eye on the chat, and I'm going to trust Ruth and Gabe to help me do that just to make sure we don't miss anything there. But I thought we'd start here with one that's been kind of fun to see what people are doing and how this is working. And that's kind of the idea of, remote training, remote conditioning. There's a couple of subtopics here related to coach engagement and some things like that we can dive into as well. But I think the first one, we had a couple questions about, specifically, how do we sort of facilitate conditioning at home when people might not have expensive equipment, and some questions about, how are you keeping players engaged in the game while being remote. So I think that's the first topic. And I think, maybe the first thing, just to get us warmed up here, I know that Gabe on our team has been working with a number of our customers on how to do this. And, sure, Gabe, please share, just real briefly on the TeamGenius part. This is not a sales pitch, but it is, interesting to see how people are using tools to do this. And even outside of TeamGenius, what are we seeing? I know many of you on the call are kind of managing this in your own ways, and we'd love you to jump in as well.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of different variety in things that I'm seeing. People that are doing everything from jumping on, putting things out on, Twitter and challenges out there, to you name the social media platform of choice, to organizations that have paid, professional services where they have drills and things set up for them. One of the things I've seen our customers work with is, a couple different things. If they're a customer that's got a paid service, where they have training and exercise and things already set up, using TeamGenius to have the kids' parents score remotely how the players are doing on the the different evaluation criteria. Maybe it's dribbling or sprinting or doing a certain amount of repetitions in a drill you guys have set up, all the way to parents doing secure video of their kids doing these evaluations. So then the coaching staff at the club can watch that, and then the coaches can actually give video feedback back to the parents and kids, so they can see how they're doing. So we do that very securely, and it's a nice thing to be able to add into whatever you're doing, to be able to have that layer of showing the kids, being able to see what the kids are doing as an organization, and then also having your coaches be able to give them video feedback on how they're doing, and having that eventually roll up into their lifetime development reports. We're all remote right now, and everybody needs things to do, and I think it's a great thing to personally, I've got 4 kids, and I think it's great to have organizations give the parents and the kids something they can do with tools at home. And I see everything from what they're using, from outside doing sprinting, to using their body, to dribbling, crazy things, you name it, they're dribbling or juggling, any kinds of things in a challenge. It could be a ball to rolls of toilet paper that people seem to be hoarding some places right now. Or, if they're going to do some weights, they could fill up, an empty gallon of milk with water and adds 10 pounds of weight, so they can lift weights with those and do that and share that with their team. Just a lot of different things. And I think there's pretty much no holds barred with the different things people are trying. We offer the ability to have you track that and give, like I said, secure feedback. But I've talked to people like, if you don't have an advanced tool for putting out these drills, have one of your coaches that's comfortable video themselves on their phone, put it on YouTube as an unlisted channel, unlisted link, so you can share it with your players. Or if you're comfortable sharing that stuff, put it out there as free content that other clubs can use, and share what you've got and help everybody else. I'm very much more about helping everybody else. So if you want to make it public wherever it is, and other kids and other clubs all over the world, I mean, the internet's everywhere. So if you put it out there public, tag it, people can see it, and you could even tag it, remote drills for, 29, 20, whatever you want to tag it. But other things I've seen clubs going from Twitter to Instagram to Facebook to even TikTok, and you name the thing they're using to put out these drills and connect with their players. I mean, I think a big part of this whole thing is connecting with your players. So if the club is going to directly connect with the players, you got to go where those kids are, to engage with them, to make them excited to post whatever they're doing for that challenge drill for the day. So.
Great. And, I saw a comment or question from actually Allie Miller, who I see is on the call here. I'd love, if you're comfortable, sharing your question about content, free versus charging. Go ahead and raise your hand, not to put you on the spot, because I can also throw it out there too. But the question, was really about, what kind of content are people charging for versus offering for free? And I thought that was kind of an interesting question, because, at first it's like, well, yeah, this is free. Of course, we're trying to, share information, keep our players and coaches engaged. But at the same time, every club is kind of in that conundrum of, well, I also need to make money and, pay my coaches and pay our, our fees and things. So is there, No, is there a way of using some of that content to justify some sort of, small interim registration fee or something along those lines? So I would love if anyone on the call has an opinion on that or has seen anything, and Ruth, feel free to chime in here too if you have thoughts on that one.
My thought is we should unmute Jennifer. She's got something to add.
All right, let's do that. Actually, Jennifer, you're ready to go, so please jump in.
Hi. Well, as far as free content, EnneagramandSports.net, that is a Myers-Briggs type tool that coaches can send to their players. It's a test. It's like a personality type test, and it just helps keep engagement up for players and coaches. So, but to answer your question, as far as what should people offer for free and what should they charge for, I mean, my personal opinion is try to balance it and do as much free as you can at the moment, as everyone is trying to figure out what's the best path, because none of us know how long this is going to last. And it's really important to start preparing for the future and understanding that a lot of players didn't get what they paid for. So being sensitive to that, that's how you're going to maintain your customer base moving forward. Being sensitive to the fact that from their perspective, paid and didn't get anything for it, or everything, I should say. That's my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jennifer, I'm going to copy your original chat because it made it to the panelists but not the attendees. So we'll.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I see that. Yeah, so a question from Jacob about the link. So yeah, absolutely, we can throw that in for everyone.
And anybody that wants to jump in and speak questions, or we can see on Mike here, just put your hand up or put in the comments that you want to chime in.
And I will just say, even just Enneagram in general, my wife and I did that. It's actually pretty fun. So you learn a lot about yourself and people when you do that. So I haven't seen the sport specific piece of that, but just in general, it's a cool exercise.
Yeah, I agree.
Rob, it looks like you jumped in here. So, feel free to jump in now or later. I wasn't sure if you.
I'm happy to jump in now, just as far as what we're doing. So as a soccer organization, our people are typically paying their dues beginning when tryouts concluded last spring. And so everybody in theory is paid in full by the time November, December hits. So we're at a part of the season now where everybody has already paid in full. And so we need to feel like we are providing value for what they have paid. So we aren't charging anybody for everything, essentially based upon the premise that they've already paid for it. And one of the things we're trying to be mindful of is generating enough virtual content to keep the kids engaged so that the parents don't start asking for refunds. Because as a small business and as a nonprofit, I started crunching the numbers, and I'm sure there are clubs out there larger than ours, but we have about 325 kids. And so even to give each parent a $300 refund is a $100,000 hit. And that's not anything we could possibly sustain. But, I can also see parents saying, well, we didn't get a spring season, and, looking for a refund even larger than that because they want it to be proportionate. So we've tried to provide as much content as possible to keep them engaged so that we can always point back to that and say, look, we've offered a lot of this stuff. And at least here in Jersey, the state organization and the leagues are looking to pushing the spring season back a little bit later and having it run into the summer. So that may save us, because at the end of the day, everybody will have essentially everything they bargained for: a handful of league games, a handful of practices, and stuff like that. But, so we've posted, like, on our website every day. We add a different fitness challenge that's usually a combination of cardio work and core work for the players to do. We also have technical or skill work challenges. We're doing a bunch of stuff, our director of coaching, through Instagram Live. So lots of opportunities for the kids to get engaged. We've been doing virtual meetings through Zoom with all the teams twice a week to replace their practice sessions. So really trying to throw as much content as them as possible. And by and large, the feedback has been great from the parents. I think thankfully they all understand and appreciate the scenario we're in, and appreciate what we're doing to try to keep the kids engaged. So that's my 2 cents for what it's worth.
That's great to hear. Allie, it looks like you joined us here. Did you want to, elaborate or maybe ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Just to clarify, we operate more on a seasonal basis. We're not a travel program, so we have classes and more like recreational level, developmental level teams. And so we definitely did everything we could to take care of the families that missed out on the last month of their winter season, but our spring season was supposed to start next week and the week after. And so we've just been in a situation trying to decide, I've seen some people are offering virtual classes that they're charging for, but then also some people are just offering them for free. And I guess no one knows how long this is going to last. We're just in a place where our spring season, they hadn't registered for it yet. So it's not like they're missing out on anything if we don't give them content, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I want to jump back to actually, Jennifer, I know, of course we know each other, and Rob brought up kind of the idea of, hey, fees were already paid. Now we're trying to, make sure we justify them. And Rob, it was great to hear that. Thanks for sharing. And also just you hope people are reasonable and fair when they're looking at, you guys doing your best to provide as much of a season as you can, or as much value as you can. And I know Jennifer has, her business really focuses on kind of this issue of, parents who maybe pay a fee, but then maybe can't get the full value out of it due to injury or otherwise. So Jennifer, I'm sure you have kind of a take on, how to think about that, and maybe what you've seen some of your customers or the clubs that you work with do in that regard.
Yes, so what our product is sports fee insurance. So what we insure is the cost of competitive sports. So right now it is extremely important to make sure that as we're preparing for the next season and knowing that everybody's going to come back online and have reservations about committing to a non-refundable sports program, offering something like sports fee insurance just helps provide that additional layer of security for parents. So things that we cover, we don't cover if a season is canceled. We cover injuries, illness, death of athlete or parent, job loss, job relocation. All of those things are going to be extremely relevant for the next season coming up. So it's important that clubs and organizations kind of look and make sure that they either outline a refund policy or offer something like sports fee insurance to just provide that layer of protection for the parents. Also,
Great, yeah.
For our policy, the clubs are the additional insured. So if the parent owes the club money still, then we pay the club directly. So that's an added value of it really protects the clubs as much as it's protecting the parents.
Yeah, that's kind of why I brought it in here, just thinking about, Allie's question and, sort of that transition of like, okay, so now we need to decide, how do we create value for a spring season? How do we, get money today? How do we get registration dollars today? And, is there a way you can sort of de-risk the season that is so up in the air right now? And I don't know those answers, right? But that's really where we're stuck right now, right? That's what I'm sure is on everyone's mind on some level.
Yeah. Well, and programs like Jennifer's are popping up in a variety of states around the country. So if you don't happen to be in her service area, you might be able to find somebody who does something very similar in your area.
Yeah, we're actually nationwide. And when it comes to insurance, you have to make sure that the insurance company is licensed in every single state, because you can't just decide to sell insurance and offer insurance. You want to make sure that it's from a licensed insurance professional because they have to follow the state guidelines for every single state. So we are actually a nationwide program.
Oh, you are? Okay. Yeah, I was thinking about the state-by-state licensing.
Yeah.
I'm glad you clarified that.
Yeah.
Great. Well, let's go in. We've got a few more topics here. Again, please jump into the chat if you have a comment or a question or topic you'd like to cover. On the list here, we've got coach engagement questions. We've got CARES Act, which I can I can share what I know as a business owner, but not to be taken as advice in any way. But I think there's some really interesting options there. And then we do have a question about, virtual tryouts and such, which of course is right up our alley. And we did a webinar on a couple weeks ago, which I know many of you were involved in. So I think to maybe change gears for a minute, I'm going to talk, let's go into the CARES Act and try to, at least share a little bit about what we know. This was passed. I know there's quite a few components to it, and it can get, relatively complex pretty quickly. So I don't think we want to go into that in tons of detail, but I know, many of you are, small business owners and trying to figure out, how do I kind of manage through this? What do I recommend? What do I do? And, I think generally there's, kind of the disaster loan route, and then there is the payroll protection program. And so what we're finding, I think, is, the payroll protection program is probably the most exciting and most attainable for most small businesses. And what's particularly great about it is they're basically offering, 2.5 times your average monthly payroll as a loan. And the most exciting part about that, or a couple of things, normally, there's a personal guarantee behind it. You have to prove that you couldn't get a loan elsewhere. Those conditions have been waived for this, so you don't have to personally guarantee the loan. And as a business owner, perhaps the most exciting part is that the plan is that if after the next, I think, 8 weeks after you're given this loan, you're actually able to basically a percentage of it is going to be forgiven essentially as a grant. Basically anything you spend on payroll and rent and utilities can be given as a grant. So the idea is, just that payroll protection, they're trying to offer a program that helps people keep their employees and not have to lay off or furlough all their employees right now. And so the rules are, we've never seen anything like this. And I know, as a business for us, we're trying to take advantage of it. I know the banks just got guidance last night, finally, on kind of the specifics of how to administer these loans. Some, I think, small private banks are actually accepting applications as soon as today. Most of the big banks, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, all of those are kind of, they have the guidance, but they're trying to kind of make sure their tech works to actually accept and administer applications. But we're hearing, as soon as Monday for those. If you're interested in that kind of thing, or whoever, owns your organization is, it's important to be really swift about it here. They've got about, I think it's $350 billion for that program in particular. And I'm not sure if it's exactly first come, first serve, but they are expecting those first funds to be allocated within a week to 10 days from as soon as probably say Monday. So that piece will go quickly. There's still a lot of other great things. You can defer payroll taxes for 6 months. You can, they've extended unemployment insurance. They've increased the amount and also eligibility. So I'm sure many of you either work yourself as an independent contractor or have a lot of independent contractors support your business. And for kind of the first time ever, independent contractors are covered under a good portion of the unemployment provisions as part of this act. So I think I'll leave it at that for now. I'm not an expert on this, but I've been following it very closely because it has big implications for our business. And there are, of course, a lot of qualifying nuances and everything. But generally, I think, everything I've heard, I was on a call with Ernst & Young or a webinar yesterday learning more. really, like, surely there are some holes in the plan, but it really is meant to be relatively generous and lenient and, you know, try to get businesses through this, just like yours. Like, nobody wants to see small businesses laying off all their employees because, you know, the reality is a huge percentage of them will never come back from it if that happens. So seems like a really good thing. And I encourage you to research it pretty heavily. Talk to your, you know, if you have an accounting or payroll person, talk to your bank and see what options, because there's, no matter your circumstance, there's probably something in this act that will help you significantly. All right, let's move on. Let's get back to more on the sports side. So I know we had a question about, you know, virtual tryouts, and this looks like it's from Devin at Phoenix Rush. Not sure if you're on, Devin, but we can touch on this pretty quickly. Anyway, we did cover this in the webinar, and we won't spend a ton of time on it. But I think, you know, Ruth, if I can ask you to take this one at just a really high level of, you know, what are some of those options we kind of landed on, and maybe why are those viable options given the circumstances?
Helps if you unmute yourself, huh? I just put the link to last week's webinar in the chat for folks who want it. There, that's without the typo. In essence, the premise was that most of us have some information on our players already, whether it's in our heads, whether it's on a spreadsheet, in a notebook, in a mobile app, a computer program. And in my talking with directors of coaching with whom I work, and on the webinar, we actually did a poll. And the crux of it was, how many players, what percentage of your team do you already know you want on your team before you go into tryouts? And the answers range in the 75 to 100% range. Most folks know most of the kids that they want to play on their team. So if you have some information on those players because they played for you before, because you've seen them before, and you actually know more than half of the team you want, then is there a way to then form teams even though you're not doing a formal tryout? And what that means is then there's a smaller number of players that you're looking to evaluate to figure out what team they should be on. So it's not as big a pool to get through those logistics. The other premise is, you know, what is the purpose of tryouts to begin with? And if it is to create teams and to get players put on the right team, then that evaluation data can be used, in fact, to do that without necessarily having to be on the ice, at the gym, on the side of a field to get through this really awkward kind of period. And it also then becomes an incentive to invite your coaches to do mid-season evaluations or end-of-season evaluations, so that information is something that you have on an ongoing basis. And can help you when times get a little tough. That's the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. Yeah, it's everyone's trying to figure out, you know, how do we get the season started and, as you know, back to normalcy. I know we talked a little about this last week, but just like ramp time, you know, like preparation for the season, like how much prep do you do in case, you know, when you do get the green light to start your season, what's the ramp time of being prepared to actually start collecting registrations and form your teams and register for leagues and all of that. And, you know, something I certainly think about, you know, it's like what can be done now versus, you know, what can be done now with maybe little risk of wasted effort or resources, and what kind of has to wait until more direction is given. And more just thinking out loud here. I'm not sure, you know, what the answer is, but
I've seen a lot of clubs that we work with, you know, internally that are setting up essentially, you know, mid-season or end-of-season evals with what coaches remember from this season for the players, or if it's a sport that's still in season, and kind of rolling that into what would be, you know, tryouts for this year. And so that if they have tryouts, then they can roll in those scores so they can get kind of averaging out of their end of season evaluations and the tryouts, or setting it up where, you know, if they have to, they can form the teams right off of those end of season evaluations or tryout numbers from last year, a combination of both of those, and just gives you guys, you know, the players ability to show you, you know, what they're doing, but then the organizations, they can, you know, jump in pretty fast into knowing where kids should go from placement last year and whatever they're doing at home and whatever they're doing for mid and end of season evaluations, and then, you know, quickly forming those teams if they need to. A lot of clubs I've talked to in regards to if they might not be able to do a full tryouts are either giving guarantees to players that can hold their spots already for this year, so they can just roll into the season with essentially the same team formations that they had last year, or just guaranteeing a spot and saying, hey, you're going to be on a team that's going to be relatively the same level as your one last year. You got a spot with us, so we're planning on you having coming back, whatever we do with the tryouts that happen or not. So
I think the other thing is being flexible on, you know, given that this is sort of a really odd situation, you might not hit it perfectly in terms of getting every kid exactly on the right team. And if there's a way in your system, whether it's your league or your club or whatever rules you have to play by, to retain kids, to keep them in your sport, to keep them in your club, and then at what point do you have the flexibility to move them around a little so that that you match up the players and the teams a little better. But if you're aiming for perfection in this time of uncertainty, I think you're just going to be frustrated. I think there's a lot of value in retaining players and members and coaches, and understanding that, yeah, there might be some movement needed at some point, and not giving up on quality, but not beating yourself up for not being perfect.
Yeah, and Jennifer, I said, yeah, question about video or comment.
Well, in question, actually, and I know this is not designed as a sales platform for your platform, but question, is there a way to utilize your existing platform for clubs that maybe don't have it, that they can adopt it when teams are maybe looking for a tryout? And, you know, if a club is looking to add this on, is there a way to utilize it right now? Like maybe, I don't know. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that you could turn your existing platform to benefit a club that doesn't already use it?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, I mean, a few thoughts here, you know, in no particular order, but, you know, in terms of, you know, we definitely have a number of customers who are taking previous data and trying to look at that and try to form teams from it. And right, they're not perfect, right? Some of those kids got better. Some sat around, you know, and haven't gotten better. And, you know, you have to, you know, do the best you can with what you have. And then I think, as to Ruth's point, you know, set those expectations with parents that, hey, this is what we've decided is the best course of action. In fact, I talked to KC Fusion Soccer Club yesterday as a customer of ours, and their plan is like, yeah, if they can't use evaluations or can't do tryouts, they're going to look at last year's data, kind of hold those rosters based, or you know, look at those and kind of say, you know, this player was on the bubble last year, maybe we'll give them a chance here, and just reserve the right to move those players around for, say, the first couple weeks when things get going. They're still hopeful to have a tryout, but if they can't, that's the plan. And I think I've had at least 3 conversations now with people who are pulling up their video footage, and, you know, not necessarily highlight reels because those are going to be all the finer moments that the player cherry picked, and, you know, but if they're able to look at, you know, let's look at some raw game footage, have, you know, an evaluation app like TeamGenius or a spreadsheet up on one screen, and have, you know, your video up on the other, go through the player, type up some notes, give a ranking. It's relatively straightforward, and it can be done with many of the tools clubs have at their disposal already.
So I was talking to, he's actually a player in the USL right now. He was signed as a homegrown for MLS some years ago, and grew up 2 doors down from where we live. And I was asking him about video and highlight reels and trying to piece together tryouts when you're actually not on the field together. And he's a relatively young coach now. And he said the videos that are most useful for him are not just the ones of a player doing sort of individual skills. He really likes seeing the player in a setting with other players, whether it's a game setting or interacting, because that then helps him assess, you know, a sense of the game, a sense of space, positioning, and awareness of others. So he was really big on, if you've got film of your players interacting with other players, whether it's a game situation or a rondo or whatever, that those were particularly useful for him when he had to go to plan B.
Yeah, right on. And John, welcome. We saw your chat just now. Do you want to share a little bit more about your situation?
Well, I'm a board member and also a coach and manager in Little League here in Anderson, California. And our season was 3 days away from opening day when everything the season was over. And my question is, we're hoping to start maybe the mid-May, like the 12th of May, if everything goes smoothly. How much time do you think will be needed between lifting this postponement and starting games? Because, you know, a lot of these kids haven't practiced together now. It will be 2 months. Go ahead.
I think you've got probably two things going on. One is athletes and teams sort of getting back in the rhythm of the sport and their interactions and how well they work together as a team. I think on the other side, you've got logistical things that the leagues have to worry about, that some leagues are thinking about it more constructively than others, in terms of field rental, officials and referees, rescheduling games and redoing brackets because, you know, you've lost time for games. I almost think that it's going to be easier on teams and coaches, because that's a pretty straightforward exercise. Your players, your coaches, your sport. I actually think that the hurdles are going to be more administrative on the league side in terms of scheduling and finding facilities and referees. And I think we've kind of underestimated that level of effort.
Well, I agree. I think we're already talking 3 games a week for each team, which before was 2 games. But we're also looking at Alaska, who doesn't start till mid-May anyway. And they managed to get their whole season in and get into All-Stars like California teams or Nevada teams or the rest. So, you know, I just wonder if we need to just go for it, or as far as managers, or need to have a few weeks, which we probably can't afford, of practice before the season starts.
John, I would say that also one of the problems is going to be that even when the restriction is lifted, there's still probably going to be a recommendation of social distancing, which is going to create a problem of actually facilitating a game. So and it depends on the sport, obviously. Are you soccer? Are you hockey? What sport are you?
Baseball.
And so, you know, baseball, you can kind of spread it out a little bit better than soccer or hockey, so it probably is going to be dependent on the sport, but there's going to be recommendations still of social distancing. And so when that is going to be lifted will be probably after everybody starts to get back together. So you'll probably have that natural build-in of teams being able to come together and practice before they actually facilitate games.
Okay, thank you. That's
And
helpful.
Pierre, thanks, John. And Pierre, it looked like you had a similar kind of situation. Do you want to chime in?
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, we have indeed a similar situation over here. Despite the lockdowns and everything we have over here in Curacao. Yeah, the main concern, like Jennifer said, to parents asking about the social distancing, how safe it will be, and who can assure them the kids won't get sick, and all those things. And it's really, really painful to see, because we are dealing with a group of lesser wealth people. So we don't have the funds to tell them, okay, or to give them all the materials they need to at home. So it's kind of difficult, and we cannot assure them how safe it is. So we are not doctors, of course. So that's a main concern for us too.
There's going to be liability. There's going to be liability issues from a club standpoint and from leagues and facilities and even parks and recs, which is why it'll be a slow process to get back to normal. And I think the big question here that everyone has is, you know, what is that time frame and how long is this going to take? And, you know, I think it's going to be dependent on region by region, sport by sport, and the comfort level of the parents, you know, not to mention the economic impact of this and parents that are losing their jobs and financially being able to afford the sport. I mean, there's so many questions up in the air, but to your point on not being doctors and not being able to provide that comfort level, certainly you need to address like your liability as well. That's a definite concern.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the comments. And Trent, I want to invite you into the conversation here. It looks like you had a question about, limitations on groups and such.
Actually, this is Jackie Cannon, so Trent hasn't had a sex change. I'm just here representing him because he had to go collect his son. I actually agree with Ruth. I feel that everybody thinks that once we have the stay-at-home order lifted, we can just go back and it's a case of how quickly can we get up and running. I believe that there'll still be a limit on the number of people that can congregate at one time. We're a soccer club, so that's going to hugely impact how we do training. And I just feel that you have to have a whole new protocol, because what happens if somebody who you're playing against, that they test positive? Does everybody on the opposite team have to go into isolation? How do you communicate? I feel that we're moving into a whole new era until everybody kind of gets used to it and has their antibodies built up. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in Sweden, where they're doing the herd mentality rather than doing the kind of the stay at home. But for us, we're right next door to Disney. We're only 20 minutes north of Disney. And I feel that once they open up ESPN, that will be a huge green light to everybody else in the state of Florida to move back. They're actually taking bookings, hotel bookings and dining reservations from June 1st. And there's a rumor that just started today. The US club are just pushing out and saying we won't be back until at least June. I don't know how accurate that is, but that's definitely something that's done the rounds here today in Florida.
I'm kind of wondering if sports are gonna, you know, how many of our sports have things like concussion protocols. In Washington State, we've got laws that have concussion protocols built in. But, you know, for sports, you know, these are the things you do if you suspect a child has hit their head too hard. I'm wondering if the powers that be, whether there are states or leagues or associations, start with protocols related to illness. And then that would be the way to deal with social distancing and what if somebody tests positive on your team and those sorts of things. I don't think they're terribly easy to come up with, but I can imagine that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually listening to a webcast the other day, and a webinar, and it was talking about how he's a pretty reputable doctor, and he was talking about how what's likely to happen, in his opinion, is that it seems that we're closer to kind of an antibody test, a rapid sort of antibody test to say, have you already had this, and are you now not contagious and can't get it, and using that as a sort of filter or gate to allow people in to say, hey, watch a professional game or something. So maybe there's a very small audience initially of people that they can prove, hey, you already had it, you're safe, you're all good. And those are the people that get let in the stadium. And eventually that pool grows and eventually we figure all that out. But I mean, just an interesting kind of perspective that really changes like how you might think about the time frame of things getting rolling again or back to normalcy, as we all hope.
Yeah. I think the other thing about time frame, I I literally live in the neighborhood that had the first case and the first death, and I mean, it's we're ground zero here, just north of Seattle, and we have been under a state of emergency since February 29th. That's when it started. Our stay-at-home orders have just been extended to May 4th. And I think, you know, the coasts are sort of at the leading edge of some of the stuff, right? So I don't want to be a Debbie Downer here, but I think it's actually going to last longer than we think, because even here at ground zero, you know, we're looking at a solid 2 months down. We're not expected to peak until mid-April, but the peak isn't the end. The peak is the peak, but there's still stuff that comes after that. So it's not like a light switch when you hit the peak in your community and say, oh, thank God it's over. It just means it starts to get better at that point. So my personal opinion, which is unauthorized by anybody, is I think it's actually going to last a little longer than we want it to. Well, it's already lasted longer than we want it to, but living here, I think it's going to last longer than we think.
The city of Dallas just announced a shelter in place until May 20th. Today, they announced that. So
yeah, we've been sheltered in place since basically February 29th.
If anybody that's on the panel too, or is listening in, wants to speak or has questions, please chat them in or raise your hand and we can put you on here.
I think Pierre had something else.
He can.
About the delivering of materials?
Yes, exactly. Because we have been buying some stuff and that's supposed to be delivered. In this case, it was China. And then the time frame changed. We're not sure when it's going to be delivered. And despite of that, they telling us because of other things that happened over there, the price has changed. So we must pay another few bucks for those materials. So if you don't have the money or you don't have the resources, so it would be very difficult for some clubs to do all those things.
Yeah, just one more thing, right? To be uncertain about and have kind of introducing yet additional variables into getting started. I have another topic for everyone. Something I was thinking about is, and I thought might be useful for the group, is how are people managing communication with, you know, I know we've talked a lot about players and kind of maybe how there's some, you know, coach to player Zoom meetings and things like that, but how are people maybe communicating with, you know, their coaches and their leagues and even parents directly? Does anyone have any, maybe, you know, anything outside of just kind of a standard email? Is there a tone? Is there a forum? Are you hosting a parent Zoom meeting? Is there, you know, anything like that? I'm just curious what people are doing from a communication standpoint.
It's Rob. We've started using Slack across our organization. We hadn't used it at all before, but once this started, we kind of got turned on to it. Through one of these webinars amongst many organizations, somebody mentioned it and we went and took a look at it. So we've started using that to try to streamline communications and just sharing and trying to keep things organized amongst, you know, the trainers and the managers and those sorts of things. At least, you know, for administrative communications, we use TeamSnap for the parent communications and things like that, but Slack has been beneficial to us. And for those of you that happen to be nonprofits, if you're turned on to Slack gives you a free upgrade to their standard plan, which is more than enough usage So something to look into for the nonprofits out there.
Thanks, Rob. Anyone else?
We had the phone provider that we use has a way where you can forward all the calls that were normally coming into the office can get forwarded to, we have like 10 people on our office team. So it all gets forwarded to our cell phones, and whoever answers it first answers it. But that way parents can still get a hold of us, and we can actually transfer calls from our cell phones to each other. And that's just built into our phone system that we already had set up in our office. We had to set it up after the fact, but it's been a good tool for keeping in touch with parents. And you can call from the office number instead of from your cell phone.
Great, thank you. And Pierre, looks like, yeah, group apps, yeah, coach to parents, player to player, coach to players. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to go about it. That's why I asked. Yeah, kind of curious. I think Slack's a great idea, and having that forwarding sounds like a good solution. Any others out there?
I was talking to somebody this morning, or actually it was yesterday afternoon, a coach in Alabama, and he actually sets up a Zoom meeting for his team, and then he as a coach, he sort of kicks it off, and then he leaves, and his son is on the team, and he lets the boys, they're about 11 years old, I think, and he lets the team have their own time just as kids together on Zoom, and they schedule it at the same time that team training would have normally have been. So the kids get together on Mondays and Thursdays, I think it is, and it puts a piece of normalcy back in their world where they can at least be with the team if they can't actually be with the team. And he says the kids have a great time.
That's clever. I like it. John, it looked like you might have unmuted. Did you have a comment?
No, my computer was telling me to unmute. I did have one question about the, I have to do what I'm told. On the Slack, do you think that would work with a school ball team also, as far as the nonprofit? Or, because school ball is really not a profit. I just wondered, do you think that, I think it'd be wonderful if my kids, who I haven't seen in over a month, could communicate, like Ruth was saying, just let them go for it. I think that'd be awesome. I think that would be so useful for them. Do you think the Slack is, go ahead.
Yeah, I believe their discounts are for the nonprofits, also for educational institutions. I know when we submitted our quote unquote application to get approved, you know, we had to provide our tax ID number, and then they went through TechSoup to verify it. But I thought there was a separate, I thought there was something that was Slack for education as well. And Zoom, by the way, I was just thinking of it. Zoom also does discounted programming. You get a step up in the service from the free plan to whatever one up is, if you're a nonprofit or a school as well. So there's tons of resources out there, and a lot of these places are relaxing their requirements and standards anyway, even if you don't meet certain criteria, just to help people get through this period.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. So yeah, John, the Slack is entirely free for kind of their basic version, and you know, we've been on Slack since pretty much day one of our company, and we've run 10 employees on the free version until just about 4 months ago when we finally upgraded to paid. So to, I believe, the standard. So even with the free version, it should have really much of what you need. And then if you can get upgraded to the standard for free, all the better. But the free version should do probably everything you need. So that's a great option. Let's see. Pierre had another comment here too. Yeah, players not getting bored by not being on the field and maybe kind of disengaging, and certainly possible. I think just off the top of my head, really thinking about Slack, I mean, I could see there being, there's a lot of emojis and things that they're used to, and you can, organize conversations. I know you can do, I think in the free one or standard for sure, you can do, face-to-face, like video and group chats and things, or conversations like we're doing now. So yeah, I mean, I think absolutely give it a shot, and hopefully the, some of the features help keep kids engaged even while not on the field. So we just have a few minutes left. I think Fuad, actually, looks like you joined the conversation.
Hello, guys. I actually joined late today and missed the last one, but I was on the earlier one that we've had. So I probably missed a lot of a good conversation. I haven't been back to listen. I just want to jump on this one that you guys talking about. We've multiple of our coaches have done the Zoom, and it's been a very good thing to keep the player connected and the player connected to the coaches and among themselves. So it's been a good experience. I've heard, I got wind of a local club here that they are doing kind of a training session on a scheduled time, like a couple times a week. They have a time of a practice where they do, the coach is on, and they'll do things. I'm just haven't located who this club is and what they're doing. I'm just wondering if anybody knows what is that all about, because just to do more than 5-10 minute worth of something, I think you lose the kids' tension after a while. So I'm just wondering if any of you know of anything like that, because none of the people commented on that.
I can tell you one thing that my daughter's team is doing. They're actually using Zoom, and the coach is engaging with the players where they're doing virtual training sessions. So he outlines the skill or the drill, and then all of them have to do it, and they're completely working out and training virtually. They take their phone or their laptop outside or wherever they have space, and they are running full sessions.
So basically they're just holding, putting the phone outside and just carrying them.
Yeah, they're like propping up the phone or turning on their laptop, exactly like we are set up right now. And everyone is on the team, and they are running a full session during their scheduled time.
Wow, that's interesting. That's good. It's something we probably should try. Real quick question. I know you only have a minute left. Is there any talk, has been any conversation about the likelihood the season in the spring is not going to happen? Was there any conversation? Was there anybody fed, you get some feedback on that?
My sense from the league conversations I've had is that people are afraid to say that. They want to stay optimistic. They want to think they still can salvage it, that it'll still happen. And so I see a lot of risk aversion in leagues about, well, we'll put it out a couple weeks or a month or something. And I don't know if it's a combination of uncertainty and almost denial that in some places this is going to impact us for a lot longer than a couple of weeks.
And I think I want to follow up with a quick question. I will be interested to, other organization, what would be the thought if really the whole spring season get washed out? You're talking a lot of clubs, obviously with soccer, but in general, the high school age are the biggest chunk of their season hasn't happened yet. And that's kind of like, okay, from a management point of view, I'm kind of uneasy about this piece and just trying to see, and there'll be a lot of talk locally about trying to figure this out. But yeah, that would be something probably could use some discussion.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really hard for whether it's the school leagues or the club leagues, if they come to a point where they've got to cancel it all. I think it's going to be really hard for them to do that. I think it's highly probable, but I think it's a really hard decision.
Yeah, and how do you, it's like, how many of those kids come back in a year if they kind of get disengaged from the game? And that's a whole, we should probably pull some people together and do a whole webinar on that when the time comes, and try to get some real ideas on, let's be real, like, if we have to cancel seasons entirely, like, what is the alternative? Is there an alternative? There's probably a lot of research and thinking to do on that topic, but I would imagine it would be, it'll be on a lot of people's minds here very quickly, if not already.
Allie,
thanks,
go ahead.
Sorry, go, Ruth.
No, Allie had a question about minimal space, and I don't think I understood the question.
Sorry, the person who was talking was saying, you were saying your daughter, Jennifer's daughter, was doing virtual class, and like most people in Brooklyn live in tiny little apartments. So the amount of content that I can think of related to soccer that I know all of my kids will be able to do is very small, because most of them don't have access to outdoor space.
Yeah, so she did it in a very, very small space. It was like a 2 foot by 4 foot, like between the pool and the wall. It was not a lot of room.
Right.
It was a lot more of juggling, calisthenics, workout. There was some ball movement, but very much drills that are within a very small defined space, because they're sensitive to that. So yeah. I mean, it's time to get creative and unique, right?
Sure.
The girls loved it. I mean, they were laughing and engaging and running in place, high knees, a lot of drills that you can do within that space.
Right. More body stuff, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Allie. I think, Jim, I know you kind of joined us here, so would love to hear. I know you had a comment. Would you like to share as maybe our kind of final topic here? I can see you're muted. Otherwise, I can just share it here too. Looks like, I started a rules of the game trivia game. Bi-weekly set of questions are emailed to players. Oh, Mike's not working. Okay. I would love to hear more about that. It sounds like fun. I know we've seen a lot of, clubs trying to do some esports too, to keep it fun and keep the team together as much as they can. Competitions, game trivia is an awesome idea. Any others, or Jim, if you want to jump in the chat and elaborate a little bit, but maybe that's pretty straightforward. Rules of the game trivia.
I would say too, for anybody out there that's, on this, or if you guys know of things that's happening with other clubs or organizations you're following, let us know, send us an email or tweet at us, or, connect on all the socials so we can share with other people, especially if it's stuff that you're comfortable with sharing ideas to, so we can keep growing through this together.
Yeah, I think that's a good stopping point then. So thank you everyone for taking some time. I hope you found this valuable. We're kind of intentionally trying to be, informal. What questions? Let's just share ideas and jump on a call like this. We're going to be doing another one next week as well, and we'll keep it going until people lose interest or whatever. So we're here for you. I know it sounds like, I think it's pretty safe to say, just about anybody on this call would probably be happy to chat with you if anybody wants to follow up or liked ideas. That's all we're trying to do here. So thanks again, and have an awesome weekend, and we'll follow up, probably next week with the next time if you'd like to join us again. So have a great weekend, and thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one, everybody.